Hello everybody. It's been a long time since I put a video up, but that's because I don't just make videos without a purpose. Today I'm going to be putting a cold air intake system on this new to me 2012 G37. These cars have become an incredible value over the last couple of years. They are solid, they run well. This one has 140,000 miles on it. I purchased it in Texas. I live in Kansas. So this one doesn't have all of the rust and grime that you get with the stupid winters we have up here. It's actually February, and today it's going to be something like 50 degrees, so about the only chance I'll get to do this for probably another month. And that's not the point. The point is we're just going to upgrade a little bit on this over the next month or so. Today it's the cold air. Then the next step will be putting a catback system on it. That'll be coming in the future. Can't tell you when. So without further ado, this is the system here. Purchased it from Amazon. There's a lot of them out there, anywhere from between, under $100 to over 500. The 500 ones have long snorkels that fit through the front of the grill. You may or may not have to do some modification to get the tubes through the radiator core support. I didn't want to hassle with that at all. It's not that big a deal. These things just don't make enough power to justify that kind of work. But they do give you a little better throttle response, allow a little bit more air into the engine, probably picks up a little bit on the low end torque, modest, very modest horsepower gains, but sounds a little better, and it looks a lot better than these plastic squares. So we're going to go ahead and start taking things apart. Try to do this in a little bit of step-by-step. Video is going to cut in and out a little bit. I'm not going to film while I'm actually working. I'm not that dexterous. I will break a phone and probably a finger if I try to do all that at the same time. So pause here for a little bit. We'll start with getting the top cover off the engine and lining out the parts. Okay, so top cover's off, and that was just 5 10mm nuts and bolts. Got a couple of castle nuts here, and then 3 screw nuts that go down, hold the backside on. You see now that the throttle bodies are on either side, and you've got the associated tubing, MAF sensors here, factory air boxes are here, some wire looming that's done through it, got little clips we're going to have to pinch apart and get out of the covers. Got to remove the MAF sensors. I think the biggest thing on this is just make sure I get the hoses in the right orientation for the PCV system. Got some PCV filters here and hoses down valve cover that inject the nasty oil air back into the system for reburn. So we'll get that stuff taken apart and then expose the throttle bodies. Probably going to go ahead and spray out the throttle bodies and use a little toothbrush or something and clean the edges of them around. I hear that these things are kind of susceptible to carbon building up on the throttle body and not allowing it to close fully, or actually closing the gap between it too much and not letting enough air in it, cold or warm idle. Can cause some issues with that. So we'll look at them, see how dirty they are. May give them a spray out and a little scrub down while we're working on it. Now the kit I got was about $130. As I mentioned, I ordered it from Amazon. It's pretty nice. It's got some nice stainless tubing here, and it looks like the weld quality is good, especially here on the MAF ports. The hardware all came with it, clamps, the silicone tubes to connect the air filters and the throttle body. Nicest part about this one is that it came with water shields. These are actually very sturdy. They're stamped steel, they're bent well, got all the associated holes you need for mounting in it. Come with these really nice billet standoffs that slide down into the original mounting spots for the air boxes. So those will just go into rubber grommets to hold them up. There's some associated hardware for the tube mounting here. It's got a nice bracket here that screws back into a factory location where the other ones came off to hold up, give a little bit of support so they stand up tall. The filter media looks pretty good. It's red, obviously. There's several different colors you can choose from. I just went with red. Now I'm going to watch these over time, because another system I put on an Acura that I have over about a month or two, this filter media started cracking and was actually getting sucked into the engine. It would be falling into the tubes and then flowing through the throttle body. Pretty nasty crap. Wasn't very pleased with that at all, so I replaced that with a K&N filter. These are not K&N, even though I think when the system was originally built it came with K&N filters because it references it in the instruction manual. I mean, these are definitely a couple tiers below that. They're not oiled, they're just dry filter media. Probably use them for a little bit. If they don't show any signs of degradation, I'll probably keep them on, but if they show any sort of wear or flaking, they're coming off, and I will get the appropriate K&Ns to put back on it. It comes with this nice little rubber sealing. It goes around the outside of these water shields. This comes in a strip. You have to cut to length, but they tell you exactly how long it needs to be in each section, and the gaps between here are for those PCV tubes to fit through. So we left a couple of them there. It's got a nice metal bar that runs through this. It's not just rubber weather sealant. It's got support, and it bends, and it fits onto the corners really well. That was another reason. It just looks really quality, and for the price, given that these are just inert units, they have no mechanical function whatsoever. So really the build quality is what you look for when you want to get one of these. This stuff seems pretty legitimate. So I'll take all this apart. I just dry fit the filter cones and everything just to make sure they went together and all the parts I needed were here. Yeah, all the hoses. One thing I didn't show you is it has these little plastic grommets here, and then this plastic 90 degree to reconnect that PCV system into each side. So there's no blocking off. You don't need to put caps or screws and block off hoses that you're not using. This is 100% factory replacement. There's a spot for everything. We'll get back to work here. Next thing is I'm just going to remove the tubes that feed the throttle bodies and work on getting these air boxes out. Okay, air boxes and tubes have been removed. There was nothing special about that. Mounting bolt here for an air box. Opposite side, mounting bolt for an air box. Here's those two rubber grommets I was mentioning where those standoffs on those water shields that came with the kit just slide down into. And those are all you need to do to get the air boxes out. Once you get this one mounting screw out, you can literally just pull straight up and the air box slides right out. I would recommend actually, since I did this out of order I guess, pull the air box out before you try to get the throttle body tubes removed. That way you're not fighting with the tension between the connections between the tube and the box. Go ahead and slide the air box out, then remove these tubes. I didn't remove anything unnecessarily. I wasn't going to take all this PCV tubing off right now because I wanted to leave the factory orientation for reference, even though the instructions I had tell you to like take all these clamps off, remove all these tubes from the valve cover, and I don't see a need for that right now. We're going to put this together in stages and try to leave as much as we possibly can the way it was. For example, I guess this is a filter, a resonator, or something. Don't know if it's like a perishable unit you can replace, or if it's just a plastic tube with a hole in the middle. But I'm going to leave that on, and if there's a way that I can maybe get some tubing and just go from this outlet port into those 90-degree elbows on the air inlet for the new system, I'm going to do that. I think there were instructions I had for this kit. All you're doing is you're getting rid of all this and you're just pulling this pipe straight from here to the new inlets. But I'm going to try to leave these in place if possible, and I just think that's a better way to do it. So we're going to dry fit the system and see if I need to turn, twist, reorient any of these, and then go get some appropriate rubber hose to feed from here to those inlets in the airbox. Or sorry, the inlet pipe for the new system. Now I mentioned the throttle bodies and some carbon buildup. Now, there is no way you're going to open one of these after X amount of miles and not see some carbon, some discoloration. These do not look bad. Honestly, I don't see any problem with them, but I am still going to spray them out because I'm here. I'm a big believer in when you have something apart, you should absolutely do what you can as preventative maintenance. So those are going to get clean. The MAF sensors as well. This thing did throw a code on me one time. It's very common with Nissans, trust me. I own another 2012 Nissan Altima, and the I think it's oh goodness gracious, 601 or something. It just points to MAF sensor, and these things, they misfire, they send faulty codes. And there's some spray that I actually have. You can clean those out. I'm going to give these a spray out too while I have them apart. That's another thing about taking this apart. The instructions wanted you to remove the MAF sensors, from the harness, take them out. I'm not doing that. I don't see a need. So we're just going to leave these out of the way for now. I'm going to clean them out as part of that preventive maintenance while you got things apart that I was talking about, and slide everything together. So that's the next step. I'm going to start dry fitting the new inlets and air box and see what we need to do to continue. Okay, I started doing the first fitment. That's for these heat shields. I think I called them water shields, but they may be. But I think actually once I put them in place, they're just more heat shields to keep the temperature down at the cone, because they go up against, they fit sideways up against the engine right here for a little bit of heat shielding and water. Whatever. It's right in front of the front air inlet anyway, so water would have come in from the front to the filters anyway, even with the old air box. Anything coming in from the front would have gone through the box filters and then into the throttle body this way. So 6 of one, half dozen of the other. I don't see where that changed a thing. Now on this side, I mentioned this rubber weather stripping that they put in. Now I understand why, because the sun, of course, is right behind me. The upper radiator hose right here, and they put in a cutout for that, and they put the weather stripping here to keep it from chafing up against the front radiator hose. So that answers that question, why they had to do that. So good on them for thinking ahead. These 2 screws here are for those standoffs that I showed you, and they lined up perfectly with the factory rubber grommets that held the standoffs for the plastic air boxes. So they're in here, fairly sturdy. Fits really good. And we got these cutouts. I told you they mentioned one was like 23 inches this way and then 11 inches this way. You had to cut it apart, trim it to fit. So I imagine that that PCV line is going to be running through one of these gaps here and here for some reason. So we'll see when we get to that point. Carry on. Alright, next up, I mentioned some of that cleaning I was going to do before I put things together. So before I actually get the down tubes from the throttle body in place, I'm going to go ahead and spray out these throttle bodies. Got throttle body and air intake cleaner. I think that it is self-explanatory. And I also have what is called mass airflow sensor cleaner right here. We'll spray out those MAF sensors. Now I do want to do this a little bit earlier in the process to give these things a time to evaporate and drip dry before I put them back in the tubes. I want them clean but dry before you start the car for the first time. So we're going to get those sprayed out, cleaned, and on. Okay, so lesson learned. I showed you a video on the earlier one that the butterflies didn't look that dirty, and they weren't. But upon further inspection, it's not the butterflies that are really the issue. It is what goes on behind them. All this stuff here, all these little things right here, are oil and carbon that have built up behind the throttle body. I'm sorry, behind the butterfly in the throttle body. So I sprayed through there and then held the butterfly open with the shop towel and just wiped right around the entry where those butterflies open and close, and all of this crud, and there's maybe even there's a lot more behind it you just can't reach unless you want to get in there with some kind of a tool with a brush and clean inside deeper. I'm not going to do that, but yeah, that's all built up right behind the throttle bodies, and all this is emissions crap over time, and probably the residue from customers or whoever services not replacing these filters on a regular basis. So I am going to leave the filters in place, and I am not going to well, I should say I am going to be replacing them. Now I probably need to get to Infinity or somewhere in the next week or so and get new ones, but yeah, this stuff here, there's no way anything other than air passes through that channel, and air is dry. Air doesn't have black, sooty, oily crap in it. So all this oil is simply blowback from out the gases from the hot oil flowing up to the top, out the valve cover into this filter, redirected into the throttle body to reburn for emissions, which, hey, I'm totally cool with that. But these filters need to be replaced regularly, and if they're not, that's what you end up with. So add to the list here. I'm going to get new filters for it. Alright, it's been about 30 minutes, and that included a little coffee and cigarette break. Went inside and checked out those PCV filters, and they're actually not these, whatever they are on the top. Who knows? Those, I don't know if there's cotton filters in there, but the actual PCV valve is down on the valve cover right here. Screws into the valve cover and feeds directly into the intake. So these are some other vent, but they do go into the air inlets. So I'm going to go to the parts store, get the hose I need to go from here to there. No big deal. Super happy with the way this is going. Spoiler, that's the driver's side air intake installed. Got 2 clamps here. The rubber boot, silicone boot fit perfectly. No issues, nice and tight. Clamps work good. Could have reused factory ones, but these are shiny, and at least for the next 100 miles. MAF sensor came back, put into the slot, fits perfectly. Screws line up well. I'm gonna probably maybe drill a hole through the heat shield here and then put a zip tie right there to keep that wire down out of the way. That'll be a project for the future. I'm going to do it, just not right now. So everything fit well there. Air cones installed, fits nice and straight up above the heat shield. I did a fitment with the hood closed before I went any further. Hood closed is fine. There's no marks where the air filter sits in the little heat bonnet right there, so clearance is good. We're going to go ahead and get the left side installed and get this buttoned up. Alright, so we have both sides installed. This one went in just as easy as the other. Got all the hoses, well, not all the hoses, I've got all the clamps tightened down. I've already started it once. I suspected that, you know, when you start it up, after I cleaned out those throttle bodies, there's going to be a bunch of crud and everything. I just wanted to get it blown out. But after about 10 cranks, it fired up. One thing I noticed is that the idle is high, and that is actually not unexpected. So with all the increased air, just the change from the previous things the ECU had learned about the way the car runs, there's a lot of parameters that are different than what it's used to. So I'm probably going to have to do an ECU relearn on it, and that doesn't take long. It's just a series of on and offs with the ignition. Gonna get that done here in a little bit. I'll go ahead and start it up real quick. I do still need to get the hoses to connect that other side of the PCV to the air intake, and that might be one of the reasons why it's actually idling a little bit high, is the PCV isn't fully connected and it could be getting extra air into the system. So we'll see. So you can see on the startup, idle goes really high. So until the ECU picks up something and it's dropping down, but it still remains a little bit high. It's fairly warm. The temperature is up. It's certainly in operating range, but it's just idling a little bit high. So my next step is to run out to the parts store, get the hose I need to reconnect the PCV system, and then I will go ahead and do this ECU relearn and button this guy up. Well, here we are back. I went to the auto store. I got the hose I need, which I actually got the wrong size, of course. I got the size that would fit the 90-degree little plastic connectors they have for the air inlets, not the size that fits the factory tubing. So in my nature, I completely MacGyvered the solution. I forced the smaller hose onto the factory end and taped the living crap out of it. So good on me. It's going to work just fine. It's probably 5 extra horsepower right there. All right, so I started it up, and it was doing the same thing. The idle was high, and it was just getting too much air for the ECU to compensate for under its current conditions. So I did the ECU relearn on it, and now it's idling just fine. So everything's good. Everything's buttoned up, tight. Start her up. So the idle comes right back to where she should on a normal startup. Coming down right where it should be. It's warm already, so everything's all copacetic there. I did notice that the idle was actually a little bit steadier after I did that throttle body clean. When I was warming it up in the morning, sometimes there'd be, it would kind of cut in and out a little bit. You could tell it was almost sound like a misfire, but really wasn't. It was, I think it was just more of the making on the fly compensation for air in the morning when it's cold out here. But that is nice and steady now, so it's idling kind of right where it should be. Shut the door. Got no SCS lights. MAF sensors are working fine. I think I said in the first part of this video that code was 601, but I actually think it's 101 and 106. I think 101's for the MAF sensor, 106 is for a MAF or something like that, but doesn't matter. I have no codes. All right, let's give her a little rev. sounds so much crisper. Throttles up, I can tell that the RPM climb is a lot faster. You get that whoom when you first start it up, and that's normal for these cold air takes. Some people like it. It's alright. I can do with or without it. That little deep whoom sound looks good. Now, there is one problem. Other than the self-inflicted one I came up with getting the wrong size hose, this one goes to just the engineering part of it, and you have to expect to have to do some things on the fly. The engine cover going back on is hitting this part of the heat shield. So I do not want to drive without the engine cover on. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to measure out, and I am going to trim out this section of the engine cover so it slides behind here. That should get it to rest nice and flat, and I can get the bolts back in it and look close to factory, even though we all who have watched this video know that it's not. So let me do that, get it back in, and we'll maybe do a little road test. Well, next step, hopefully last step, I'm going to go ahead and trim off the sides of this engine cover. There's a natural body line, if you will, or molding right here where it drops down on the side, and that is nearly exactly where it's hanging up on that heat shield. So got the trusty Dremel out, and I'm just going to follow the inside of this line straight as I can all the way across and just cut the corners off of this engine cover, and it should just rest right where it's supposed to. So we'll do that and pop it back on. Alright, we got the cover trimmed off. Here's the residue. Just cut these corner pieces off, and now I've got it sitting right across here. It fit down nice and flat. You know, hindsight, I could have maybe followed the corner here and blah blah blah, but that just wouldn't be me, because perfection is the enemy of good enough, and I don't like having enemies. So engine cover's back on. There she sits. She's really good looking. I have to say that it dresses it up nice. Functionality, you know, it's almost a afterthought because it just looks so much better. All right, we're gonna go ahead and pop inside and take this thing out on the road. Give me just a second. Hood closed nice, no clearance issues. Fire this guy up here. Make sure my Bluetooth is turned off so this thing doesn't cut over to the stereo. Safety first, seatbelts always, kids. You know, YouTube's like super big on kids videos and making sure the community is safe. You should definitely wear your safety belts. And yes, I know my brakes squeak. They just get a little rust on them overnight. Taking it nice and easy at first. Make sure nothing's falling apart under the engine. Oh, it sounds so good. Throttle response is better. Just first impressions. The RPMs tack up quicker. I'm not a big speeder, and I'm living right next to a school, so I'm gonna be gentle in at least the first couple of corners here. The factory sound of this G37 is something that it's really nice, and if it wasn't for just the performance gains you can get out of making mods like the cold air and then definitely doing the catback system, it's almost a shame to tamper with it. If all I was getting out of doing this was sound, I would never consider it, because this car just has a nice little throaty roar to it. Sounds better inside the car than outside even. It's the way it resonates inside through the cabin when you have the windows up. It's a really nice car. I mean, I've been on these cars for a bit. I had a friend who has one, or had a G35, and You know, I've kind of told my son that when he graduates, he should look for a G or a Q, because they're just so, what you get for the money on these things used, I think it's the best value in motoring, really. Rear wheel drive, decent handling, and the performance, you know, you're talking sub 5.5s when you do these mods, maybe close to a 5-second 0 to 60. Just a great little car to have around your life. I'm enjoying the hell out of it. I came from an Acura, you know, my Acura was nice, and I really enjoyed it for many years, and it's just, it is what it is. It's a front wheel drive car. You know, you can't hang gas out when you want to. The Acura handles better than this car, to be honest with you, but you combine that with the speed and the fun factor of having just a car that's being thrown in the right direction, back to front. Just a heck of a little deal. All right, let's see if I can one hand around this corner a little bit, get a little bit, get traction controls on, but oh, that picks up so much better. Gonna close out, you know, head back to the house and just enjoy this. Maybe take it out on the highway a little bit later. This deal in all, you know, is like $130 for the kit. 2 drop-in factory replacement K&N filters for the stock boxes would have been $110. They're $55 each, which you just cannot justify doing that when you can get a kit that's made this well and adds more benefit, looks better for $20 more. It's silly. If I wasn't filming this video, if I had done this back to front in one swipe, it's an hour. I mean, it's literally an hour. You can't beat it. So I'd highly recommend this. Getting this cold air intake system, sold by many vendors. I saw the same system listed at least 6 different shippers on Amazon. Very common. Hell of a deal. All right, well, I'm getting into the heart of the beast here with our nice little 20-mile-an-hour speed limit, so there's no point in showing you anything here. But hope you all enjoyed it. I'm gonna post up again if notice anything or think of anything that might be a little bit better to do next time. Just gotta enjoy this little guy. Thanks for watching.